Here we go. So let's go. We are on Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, and we are now going to go back to the needle. Remember, Rav Chanina's Kanakonim talked about an animal which was slaughtered in the Azara, in the courtyard, and in that meat was found, in that flesh was found a needle, which we established. We explained over the past couple of days why we assume that needle is tameh. Okay, and the Mishnah and he told us that the flesh that this needle comes to contact with is tameh. And the Gemara is going to analyze why is it tameh, because normally, again, as we discussed many times, in order for something to become tameh, it has to first, any item which comes tameh has to first come into contact with a liquid. Okay. By the way, the idea behind it, which we'll explain now for the first time, according to the Sefer Chinuch, says the reason that a liquid has to first come into contact with any item which is going to become tameh is because it's seen as almost like finishing the item. It's like, imagine when you finish making something, what do? Like you rinse it off, right? In other words, you're rinsing it off. It's almost like then it's completed. Once it's completed, now it is Huchshar. Now it's like it's set. It's ready to be able to receive things. But until it comes to that point, it's not really complete. Okay, until something's complete and putting liquid on something, that's when it's complete. So over here, we're talking about an animal which was slaughtered. Okay, there's a needle which was found inside of it. The needle we established is tameh. We're going to assume it's tameh. And Mishnah said that the flesh is tameh. But what liquid came into contact with this flesh that's enabling it to be susceptible to tumah? That's what the Gemara is going to begin by discussing. Yeah, you with me on the question? Yeah, fine. Says the Gemara, Chaf Amud Aleph, first column, second paragraph. V'abasar tameh, the flesh is tameh. Hi basar de is kasher b'mai. In what way, how did the flesh become susceptible to tumah? In other words, which liquid came into contact with it? Inema dis kasher b'dam. If you want to say it's because it came into contact with blood. V'amrav Chia bar Abba Amrav Yochanan. Minayim l'dam kachim sheina machshir. We established earlier that the blood of sacred offerings is, although blood in general is one of the beverages which is able to cause something to be susceptible to tumah, the blood of kachim, the blood of sacrificial meats, is not one of those. Why? Pasuk says in last week's parsha, "Shenamar lo sochlenu ala aretz shechanu kamayim." It says about the blood of an animal that you shall not eat the blood; you shall spill it on the ground like water. And why the fact that the Torah describes spilling it on the ground like water tells us that the blood that is needed to make something susceptible to tumah has to be like water. And just like water could be spilled on the floor, right? Just regular water can be spilled on the floor. So do blood that could be spilled on the floor. However, right? Dam shnishbach kamayim machshir, with the second column, blood which is spilled on the ground like water, that generates susceptibility to tumah. V'she'ein nishbach kamayim ina machshir, but blood which cannot be spilled in the water like blood, like blood which cannot be spilled on the ground like water, does not make items susceptible. And we know that sacrificial blood is not spilled on the ground. You catch that blood, you sprinkle on the mizbech, and therefore the blood of kachim, we can't be talking about blood of kachim because that would not make meat susceptible to tumah. So the Gemara says, so what do you want to say? Rather, we're talking about that it came into contact with beverages of the butchering place, like water, right? Because they used water in any sacrificial, like they have hoses. If you ever go to a slaughterhouse, they have hoses to hose things down. So they have water in these places. Okay, but one of the first discussions we had for Amar Yosi Bar Chanina, Mashke Beis Mat Bechaya, the beverages of the butchering place, Lo Dain Shein Dacha. Not only are they pure, El Shein Machshirim, but they do not generate susceptibility. Right. So we already discussed earlier that the water found in the Beis Hamikdash area does not make things susceptible to tumah. So Gemara says, rather, there is this rabbinic law which we touched upon earlier, and that is that while normally your regular flesh, a regular piece of meat outside the Beis Hamikdash, it needs to come into contact with water or a beverage to make it complete, because until it comes to that point, it's not complete. But when it comes to things in the Beis Hamikdash area, even if they're not complete, as soon as they are ready, as soon as they're considered holy, then there's this rabbinic notion called chibas hakodesh, literally the love or the esteem of holy things. And basically what it means is that since it's so important, since you now sacrifice this meat, you sacrifice this animal, and the meat is now kodesh, it's holy, therefore because it's so holy, it's already complete. There's nothing else you need to do. It's like if it's fit for the mizbeach, you don't do something else beyond that. And therefore when it comes to, again, there's a rabbinic law, but when it comes to items which are kodesh, even if they don't have normally you need to have liquid or beverage that comes onto it in order to make it complete and therefore ready to be susceptible to tumah. When it comes to holy things, you don't need that last step, and therefore the Gemara is saying over here, you don't need any liquid, any beverage to make it susceptible to tumah. Once it was slaughtered, it already is susceptible to tumah, and therefore the needle that touches that meat is going to be susceptible to the needle. The meat is susceptible to tumah, and the needle, which was tameh, is going to make the meat Tame. Okay, however, the Gemara asks 28:2. Amar d'mahani lechi bas hakodesh. When do we say that holy things are susceptible? That because of the love, because of the esteem that these holy things have, they're susceptible. Lifsule gufe. Only to say that they themselves could be unfit. In other words, remember, it's a rabbinic law that says that when something holy is ready to be holy, it doesn't need to be huchshar. It doesn't need to have a beverage go on it to complete it. But that only is going to create the lowest level of tumah, to make make it invalid, right? In other words, to make it something which is on the lowest level. Limimna beirishon v'sheni nami. Are you going to say that this rabbinic law is going to make something already on a much higher level, that it's going to actually be tameh, to the point that it could be mitame other things? Whoa, who said that? We don't even know. Is that true? And again, remember, Chanina Skanakonim said that the pin makes the meat. He didn't say pasol, invalid, which means it's the lowest level of tama. Rather, he said it makes it tame, which implies that it could be mitame other things. Right? So it's already on a higher level. And if that's what you're saying, then Tifshot by Reish Lakish actually asked this as a question. And he said, Tzror Shomanachos, a dry lump in a mincha offering, which comes into contact with the source of Tumah, even though it never had a beverage go onto this lump of this of the mincha offering, in which case, normally, if it was outside the base of Mikdash, it would not be tameh at all. But because of chibas hakodesh, it is going to be tameh. So Reish Lakish asks, Monim bo rishon v'sheni olo. When we say it's tameh, do we say it's just invalid, or do we treat it tameh to the point that it's like a rishon or sheni? And Reish Lakish did not have an answer. If we're reading our Mishnah correctly, the way you just suggested, then we do have an answer. We do have an answer. We say that it actually is tameh, and it's actually able to cause other things to become tameh. The fact that Reish Lakish asked this question and did not have an answer from our Mishnah teaches us that we do not say that our Mishnah does not mean that. Rather, our Mishnah does not talk about this type of case. It must be that the flesh in our case is tameh for a different reason, and therefore we reject the explanation to say that the reason that the pin is able to make the needle is able to make the flesh tameh is because of chibas hakodesh. That can't be, because again, our Mishnah, the Chanina Skanakonim's ruling was to tell us the flesh is tameh, which means that it's not just invalid; it's on a higher level. And therefore, it cannot be simply from chibas hakodesh. So, what is the beverage that is making our? So we have to go back and say there has to be a beverage. Which beverage is it? So, we're talking about a case where there was a cow that was designated as a shlamim offering. V'avira banar. And the owner, on the way to the base of Mikdash, you walk, right? How do you get the animals to the base of Mikdash, right? So, it's not like you showed up at the base. So people would schlep their animals with them as they walk from whatever part of your Eretz Yisrael to come to, or even if they buy in Yerushalayim, they walk to the base of Mikdash. And the person walked it through a river on his way to the base of Mikdash, ushchata, and then it was slaughtered, v'adayin mashka tofei chala, and there was still liquid from the river that was on the animal, on the flesh. And therefore, the question was, which liquid caused the flesh to be susceptible, huchshar? For anything to be able to become tameh, it has to have some beverage put on it. We said it can't be the blood. The blood of a kachim doesn't make it susceptible. It can't be water, because we said that water in that area does not make it tameh. But if it's water that came from elsewhere, water that came already from earlier on, the water from the river on the way, that water caused the animal, and the animal was still wet when it was slaughtered. That water that's on the animal caused the meat to become susceptible to tumah, and the needle went ahead and made it tameh. Good? Yeah.
I don't know, but it seems that you wouldn't have a wet animal that all of a sudden just comes in and it's, oh, let's go. Like there's no.
I don't know, right?
Period of drying out or having, you know what I mean? Like
clearly not.
It seems like there would be some more of
it's a remote case. It's a remote case, but sometimes, it's very wet, it's cold outside, the animal is still shivering, and let's go. We got to move. Okay.
Isn't it also possible that the animal went through the river, for example, but the needle didn't get wet?
That's fine for the needle not to get wet, because the needle's tummy already. We need we're talking about the flesh. The flesh has to be wet, so as long as one side of the flesh is wet, the outer part.
Yeah, even though it's the outside part.
Correct. Okay. So now the Mishnah also said nimtzeis beperesh hakotar. If the needle was found in the excrement, even the flesh is tahar. Okay, so he said if it's found in the flesh, right, after they slaughter it, they're like chopping up the animal, and they find like a needle stuck in its arm, whatever leg, so then the whole flesh is tameh. But if they find it in its waist, okay, right after they slaughter the animal, there's some, there's some still waste in the animal, they find it in the excrement, then everything's going to be tahar. Ask the Gemara, once we've established above that we're talking about an animal that just walked through a river. The assumption is an animal walking through a river, what does it do as it walks through the river? It drinks. And therefore, we're going to assume that there's going to be moist excrements. Excuse me for being so detailed over here. And therefore, the excrement itself should be treated as liquid. Okay? And the needle came in, so therefore the needle itself, the excrement itself should be treated like liquid. And then the excrement touching the meat, touching the flesh, should be able to make the flesh tameh. Right? In other words, coming into contact with the liquid of the excrements, and then it's coming into contact with the flesh. So no, we're dealing with the dense excrements. In other words, yeah, maybe it could be liquidy, but it's not. Says the Gemara, another answer, even if it's watery excrement, it is a putrid beverage. When does a beverage cause tumah? That's only if it is a regular beverage, or whatever regular beverage. But if it's a beverage which is putrid, like waste, it is not going to be able to convey tumah, and therefore the Gemara says that is not a reason why. So therefore, if it's found, the needle is found in the excrement, everything is going to be tahar. Okay, now we are going to start wrapping up our entire discussion. And so the first thing we're going to do is list the longest possible chain of transmission from a sheretz, from a rodent, all the way to as how far can the tumah go in regards to chulin. Again, there's three levels. Kachim is the sacrificial stuff. Truma is for the stuff for the Kohanim, and Chulin, from the word Chol, is the most basic stuff. How far could Tumah go from a sheretz? How many steps can it take? So it says the Gemara, Tani Kamei Rav Sheshes, sheretz metamas amashkin. You have a sheretz which contaminates beverages, umashk metamas a kli, and then the beverage could contaminate the utensil, uchli metamas ochlin, and then the utensil will contaminate food, va'ochl metamas amashkin, and then the food contaminates beverages, v'lamanu sholosh tumas b'sheretz. And so we see three levels of derived tumah in the case of a sheretz. Now if you were counting, you actually would say, as the Gemara says, Hani Arbahin. That wasn't 3 steps, that was 4 steps. What are you talking about? So the Gemara says, you're right, we have to remove one. Guz mashkin deresha. Remove the first case. Remove the first step. Sheretz does not contaminate a beverage, but rather the sheretz contaminates a utensil. Ask the Gemara. In other words, if you were following, there's 2 times that it said beverage. So the Gemara says, we're going to take out one of the beverages. The Gemara says, take out the first beverage. Okay, so the Gemara says, Adra, baguz mashkin seifa. Take out the second beverage. And read it like this. A sheretz contaminates a beverage. The beverage contaminates utensil, and the utensil contaminates food. Why did you remove the first beverage? This first step where it said beverage in the beginning, remove the second beverage. Gemara says, no. Lo ashkan tanam mashkin metamin kli el Rav Yehuda. We have not find through our entire discussion any Tana who says that a beverage can contaminate a utensil. In other words, the way that you're suggesting right now is that the step would be a sheretz contaminates a beverage, the beverage contaminates a utensil. But there's no one who says that except for Rav Yehuda. V'hadarbe, and we saw earlier Rav Yehuda actually retracted this halacha, and therefore we cannot remove the beverage at the end. Rather, we're going to read it again, saying that it's a sheretz contaminates a beverage. The beverage. We're going to remove the beverage in the beginning and rather say that it's a sheretz that contaminates a utensil. The utensil contaminates the food contaminates the beverage, and that was the 3 steps. Okay, v'simanech nizyasa, and the mnemonic, which remember this is a beer keg. Why a beer keg? Think about it. How do you make beer? I don't know, but let's learn. A beer keg is basically you have a utensil, okay? So sheretz touches utensil, and then they put the hops in, that's your food, and then they put the liquid in, that's your beverage, and that's the 3 steps we're talking about. The utensil, the solid, the beverage. So that's how you remember the steps of tumah. Now you're never going to forget this. Okay, says the Gemara Tzan Hassam, we learned to the Mishnah. Sheretz shemsa b'tanur. If a sheretz was found in an oven, hapash b'socha shniya. Okay, a sheretz is found in an oven, then the bread that is in the oven is a 2nd degree tumah. Again, you have an oven. Oven is made like of earthenware back in the day. It's an oven like ours, and basically a sheretz goes into that oven. Okay, a dead sheretz is found in the oven, and there's bread also in the oven. So the bread is considered a 2nd degree tumah. Okay, says the Gemara. Right? Because why? Because the sheretz touches the oven becomes the 1st degree, and then the oven touches the bread, 2nd degree. But let's treat the oven as if it's full of tumah. In other words, the oven is a contained space. Why don't we treat it as if the sheretz fills the entire space? In other words, sometimes we see this halacha that sorry? And then, right, and there, if the sheretz is considered as if it fills the entire space, then what that would mean is that it's as if the sheretz comes into direct contact with the bread, and therefore the bread will not be a 2nd degree, meaning sheretz, oven, bread, but rather we should treat it like sheretz comes in direct contact with the bread. Okay? Then the bread will become a 1st degree because it's as if it touched the sheretz. He said to Rav Barhava, you can't say so. Why? The time was taught in the Brisa. You may have thought that all utensils can contract tumah by being in the airspace of an earthenware vessel. In other words, you may have thought that a utensil that's found in an earthenware vessel, i.e., again, your ovens are earthenware, you may have thought that a utensil that's found in such a space would be tameh. Okay, tamalomar kol asher b'socho yitzma. We're at 20b1. The pasuk says that anything inside this vessel shall be tameh. Usmich le mikala ochel. And then it says the next pasuk says of all foods. So the pasuk says everything inside this oven is tameh. And then the next word is of all foods. So what do we see from there? Ochel mitamim aver kli cheres. Okay, that food could become tameh from the airspace of an earthenware vessel. Vein kol hakelim mitameh aver kli cheres. Utensils cannot contract tumah through being in the airspace of an earthenware vessel. So what does that have to do with our discussion? Like this. Because if you were to say that the oven is seen as if it's filled with sheretz, then what would that mean? Then now we know a utensil cannot make another utensil tameh. But a sheretz could make utensils tameh. Okay, the fact that the Torah says that the vessel which is found in the oven is not tameh, right, tells me that by definition we don't treat the oven as if it's filled with sheretz, because if it was, then it would be a sheretz coming into contact with the utensil, and it would be tameh. The fact that it says that the utensil is not tameh, the fact that it says utensil inside a utensil like a cup found inside that oven is not tameh, because we don't fill the whole thing up with what that teaches me is that we don't treat the whole thing as if it's filled up with sheretz. Rather, what's happening is sheretz is coming into contact with the oven, and then the oven is coming into contact with whatever's inside of it, right? In other words, if you were to say that a utensil is able to become tameh inside an oven, that has a sheretz in it, that would be a reflection of the fact that the entire oven is filled with a sheretz. And then you say, oh, it makes sense because sheretz is able to make a utensil tameh. The fact that we don't say that, the fact that Torah says, no, it's only food, that means that by definition, we're saying by definition, the sheretz is not filling up the whole thing. And the reason the utensil is not becoming tameh is because it's the sheretz coming to contact with the oven, and then the oven coming into contact with the utensil. And we know the utensil cannot make another utensil tameh. And therefore, we learn from here that we do not see that when it comes back to food, which we know the oven is able to make it tameh, how is it making it tameh? Not because we treat the oven like it's filled with sheretz, because if we did, then the utensil should also be tameh. The fact we don't means the reason that the way the oven is tameh is that the sheretz coming into contact with the oven, and then the oven comes to contact with whatever is next to it, but we don't treat the whole thing as if it's filled with sheretz. Okay, tomorrow we will wrap up this whole discussion, God willing. Have a wonderful day.